Welcome to the CHSS Seminar Series. Today we have two special invited guests. First, we have Professor Keith Debet, who comes to us from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, where he is a Coleman Foundation Entrepreneurship Fellow and a Joint Professor of Geography and Sustainable Tourism and Hospitality in the Department of Geography. And he's also a faculty member in the Department of Marketing, Entrepreneurship, Hospitality, and Tourism. Dr. Debet will discuss Future Skills Gap, addressing how students can better prepare for life after university. Our second special guest is Professor Sami Bodela from UAEU's own Department of Cognitive Sciences. Dr. Bodela's field of interest is cognitive neuroscience with a special focus on the processing and representation of Arabic, which is a subject that he has published on extensively. Today, Dr. Bodela will discuss the brain and human language. Thank you for attending, and please save your questions for our guests until the end of the presentations. Dr. Debet?
It's a pleasure to be here today. Students are looking to gain employment upon acquiring a degree and, of course, capture the right types of skills in order to thrive upon graduation. And so these issues of getting the right skill sets are very, very important for students, for chief executive officers, and for the labor pool in general. And I know Dubai in particular is very focused at enhancing the skill set of the population in order to compete in the workplace. And that is what my talk is about today, is what are these skills and are there significant gaps that we need to fill in order to be competitive. And so some scholars have argued, yes, indeed, there is a skills gap in many labor pools or labor markets throughout the world, particularly in the US, but also in Europe and the developing world. And there's a real demand for a certain type of worker, a certain type of skill set, and oftentimes the labor pool and universities aren't generating those students to fill those gaps. So there's a lot of literature on this, but not as much empirical data and hard data that can figure out what these issues are about. In the United States, there's a lot of media attention on this in terms of headline stories regarding this skills gap. It can revolve around robotics, or the skills shortages in advanced manufacturing firms, logistics, the supply chain. You see all these headlines from different papers. The big concern that the 18 to 34 age cohort, that age group, people coming out of school, aren't necessarily being trained in sort of the cutting-edge, high-skill occupations they need to be trained at. This is particularly true in manufacturing. I think typically students are thinking about a white-collar job or in an office environment and not thinking in terms of factory jobs. But in fact, the old-school manufacturing factory job of yesterday is very different to the advanced high-tech manufacturing of today that pays a very, very, very high wage, particularly in the US. And so there's a great shortage of workers, and you see some of the stats here, in not just regular traditional factory firms, but high-tech advanced manufacturing, whether it be in the life sciences or other sectors. So there's a real concern throughout America and elsewhere that we're not really filling that gap, that demand for high-skilled workers. In terms of just the general sort of thesis of this paper, the skills gap has been increasingly identified as an issue, but not as much empirical data as I mentioned earlier to look at this. In my own state, I'll tell you a little bit about my background in a minute, but the North Carolina Association of Workforce Development Boards, this is the group that is trying to figure out how to have curriculum and degrees and programs that match the labor market needs, has great concerns about this. So there's a lot of interest in pulling data, figuring out what's happening in the real world. You might wonder why. Well, there's lots of reasons for this. If there is a skills gap, then products and services are less accessible than firms want them to be. Also, typically, if they're hiring folks that don't have these skills, then they have to spend money on training or outsourcing, and they have to pay for on-the-job training. Jobs also, typically, will stay open for a long period of time. Some of these high-skill occupations, the job is open for months and months and months because they can't fill it. And that is a big problem for firms in terms of wanting to move quickly in the marketplace. And then, of course, there's a human resource implication. They have to pay for extra training costs for that worker. And they want that worker to come in and be ready to roll quickly. That's the area I'm looking at, that labor market between Charlotte, a banking capital, and Raleigh-Durham, which is a high-tech science park sort of center with a lot of innovation. I'm looking at that place in between. When you look at that place in between, it's roughly about 2 million, 2.5 million workers. You got about 128,000 manufacturing employees, many in very high-tech, very advanced manufacturing. And we also have about 37,000 engineers and a very, very large military population with a lot of military spin-offs in terms of development. What we did, and this was at the request of several funded agencies, the Greensboro Partnership, bottom left, High Point, Chamber of Commerce, and then also some other grant sources. They were very interested in figuring out where are these difficult to fill jobs, why aren't they filling, what is the skills gap, and how do we get students better trained to compete in the marketplace in this particular geography. In terms of major findings, really what they wanted me to do, well, my team, I shouldn't say just me. I had a team of PhDs that were working with me on this. They wanted to map this out. They wanted to find out, okay, where are these difficult to fill jobs, 6 months, a year and a half with the job opening open and no one able to fill it because of the skills gap. Where are they? Can we map these out? The reason why you can't map them out is companies won't tell you because it's confidential data. We were able to get that data from these firms, provided we didn't reveal the identity of any one company in terms of that data. So it was very good. We were able to put it in a computer mapping program, a GIS program, map it out, and figure out where these clusters of difficult to fill jobs were. The first one is Hondajet. And I will tell you that most of these difficult to fill jobs are in this area here. You won't really recognize this geography necessarily, but that box there is the area around our airport, just like the Dubai airport. And we see a lot of difficult to fill jobs in that airport area. And I have a feeling that's probably happening in Dubai, well, I don't know. The other area I'll talk about later. This is the world corporate headquarters of Hondajet. I know a lot of you drive Honda cars, but actually now their big push as a firm is aviation. And they are now building planes. They've gone through a very tough FAA certification process. That plane is out on the marketplace. And they've gone from 0 workers 8-9 years ago to about 4,000 workers at about $130,000 US on average. And they demand master's and PhD workers. And we've had a hard time as a market fulfilling their needs. The plane they're building is a precedent-setting plane in terms of composites, carbon emissions, and also their innovative engine on the wing design. And this is one of the first planes that they built. The plane has been very successful. Now they're expanding hangar space and aircraft space very, very quickly. Just last month, is it last month? I think 2 months ago, Forbes magazine covered this plane, and we were very excited about this headline in Forbes magazine that it's the world's best-selling entry-level business jet, and it's considered that it has one of the most radical designs in this business jet market, and it's actually out-competing all the traditional business jet competitors in the marketplace. So we're very excited about that. On the other hand, we also have what was the largest independent MRO. An MRO is a maintenance, repair, overhaul, aircraft maintenance company, MROs. I am sure you have several MROs at your airports here in the UAE. So, what are these difficult to fill hard skills first? And you can imagine what they are given that brief overview of our market. It's going to be very focused on aviation-related skills, and that includes industry-specific certification. That can take a long time to do. You come out as a student with a bachelor's or a master's degree, you think you know everything, and then you try to get this job and find out I know very little in terms of getting the kinds of certifications I need to be in the labor pool for those sorts of firms. Also, engineering technologies. Huge demand for engineering technologies, not just in our market, across America. And of course, the other key thing, skilled trades. Particular, very specific, targeted skilled trades. Very, very important hard skills. And these are the things that have been happening in our market. On the other hand, we shouldn't forget the soft skills. I don't think it's really a big surprise to find out these skills included just basic critical and analytical thinking, which is what I think universities do well. We asked recruiters and folks that were recruiting companies, well, exactly what should be the appropriate balance? And we found kind of an interesting conclusion. Yes, for the human resource people, there is roughly an equivalent balance, although actually a tendency to prefer personal soft skills, but it's pretty much balanced. People that are hiring know it should be balanced. The people that are applying tend to overemphasize their soft skills and don't have the hard skill priorities they might need to have. And these are the skills that they identified as key. Now you'll notice there's not one skill that kind of rises to the top. It's a very multi-skill vision for these folks. It's 5, 6 different skills all need to be operating together. The second key future skill, again, something we're familiar with, but even more important to them now than it was yesterday, is novel and adaptive thinking. Social intelligence, again, this is something we are familiar with. It's talked about a lot in the literature. This is a key skill. The CEO said, we know this is an old skill. It doesn't matter. It's going to be even more important in the future. This idea that we have a diverse world. Virtual collaboration. Now, I've struggled with this myself because for the last 2 or 3 years, I've been teaching almost exclusively online. So, for example, right now I'm literally teaching because I have a lifetime discussion board that's happening during this time. When I finish, I can check on what they've been discussing. But how do you create a presence virtually is very, very important. And how do you collaborate? How do you build trust virtually? What we found is that you have to have both. As a student, you have to push yourself in both soft and hard skills and get a balance there. Also, in terms of these future skills, the emphasis is on flexibility and creativity and functioning in a very fast-changing environment. So I think that's it. Hopefully I didn't extend my time. I'd like to thank my sponsors, and I'd like to thank you for listening. Thank you.
So to anticipate on what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to be telling you about 2 studies that we have done recently on a group of multiple sclerosis patients and 1 case study with an aphasic patient. And the goal of this was to look at what happens to language processing when the brain is actually damaged. Multiple sclerosis, as you may well know, is an abnormal response of the body's immune system directed against the central nervous system. There is what we call the T cells, which are immune cells that normally go to the brain via the blood, and what they do is they get inside the brain and start eating up the myelin sheath which wraps around the axon. So damage to the myelin, which is the sheath that wraps the axon, causes the scars on the tissue, and these scars are called sclerosis. And that's why we call it multiple sclerosis, because there's many instances of it, and it can attack anyone, anytime, and then we don't know the reason for that. And it is degenerative in the sense that it's bound to get worse with time. If you have got a normal brain, the myelinated, if you like, neuron carries information at a rate of 2 to 110 meters a second, whereas a demyelinated transfer of information, that is to say in a person who has got multiple sclerosis, the rate of transfer is 0.2 to 1 meters per second, such that if the information needs to go, for example, from your brain to your calf, for example, right, around 1.5 meters, right, that information will take 12 milliseconds in a normal person, but it will take 5 seconds in a person with advanced multiple sclerosis. So the question that we wanted to ask, if a person has got multiple sclerosis, what are the consequences for the cognitive processing of language? Okay, and we wanted to do this with Arabic for reasons that I will explain now. So we focused on morphology. So morphology is this domain, so taking a population of multiple sclerosis patients and asking how this disease, how this problem that has befallen them will affect their processing of Arabic language, and in particular their processing of morphology. And for those of you who are not from a linguistic background, morphology relates to or refers to our ability to take one word and make it even longer, to create a new word. So if you take govern and you add ment to it, you can create government, governments, governmental, and so on and so forth. The Arabic speaker is facing all the time the problem of decomposing a word into its components so that they can reach meaning, okay? So a surface form by definition, if you like, in Arabic, has got these two components. We actually did also some Fmri study to look at whether if we take a word that is simple and then make it even more complex and more complex, what do we get? Which parts of the brain respond? Because with the EEG, we can tell when things happen, but with fMRI, we can tell exactly which part of the brain is doing it. And when we compared things like, if you take something like, if you take something like taraka, and then you make it, for example, taraku or batnun, batnuha, so something like you make it even more complex, longer word, and so on and so forth. So what you find here is the typical bilateral activation of the superior temporal gyrus, middle temporal gyrus. But for those words that are complex in Arabic, and all words are complex in Arabic, we have got something that we only find in English with words like walked and talked, right? With the inflectional past tense, the regular past tense, we have got the activation of the left inferior frontal gyrus, suggesting that the complexity in Arabic is actually causing the brain to work even harder to support language processing. Right? So what happens when a person actually is confronted with word understanding in Arabic and they do have multiple sclerosis? So our starting point was that morphological decomposition is supported by intact white matter fiber bundles. So in order for you to be able to sort of, process language properly, you've got to have intact neurons. And intact neurons mean you have to have intact axons with their myelin sheaths wrapping them so that the information can be transferred between one set of neurons to another set of neurons. Okay, but these fibers are damaged in multiple sclerosis. So our hypothesis when we did the experiment was that morphological decomposition in MSA in people who have multiple sclerosis may be suppressed. So we tested 8 early multiple sclerosis patients. 4 of them were males, 4 were females. The average age was about 41 years of age. All of them were relapsing remitting. It means they have got the problem, they got better, and then it came back again. What this suggests to us is actually when there is damage to the white matter fibers that protect the that protect the axon of the neuron and that help information to go quickly from one area of the brain to another, the decomposition process is actually damaged. There is no decomposition, okay? So full form access is resorted to when the decomposition heuristic fails following damage, okay? It cannot be supported anymore. So the full model of Arabic would look like something like this, where we have got this root that is a decomposition root, where people extract the root and the word pattern, and the full form root, where people just go to the full form directly, okay? And in Arabic, it seems that this decomposition route is faster or the default, whereas brain damage not affecting white matter fiber structures may leave decomposition route intact, but if there is a problem, in fact, like with multiple sclerosis, this root is going to be damaged, and now extraction of root and word patterns will take place. So the question that occurred to us then, what would happen if people do not have these lesions that affect, if you like, that affect the axon, that affect the myelin sheath, but instead is focal, is only in one place, Okay, still can information still be transferred from one area to another such that we have our decomposition back again? So what we did then is we looked at one patient. So it was a case study. This patient has focal damage. So this is a CT scan, and with CT scans, as you may know, left is right and right is left. So this is his left area here. This CT scan was taken 1 year post-onset, and he has got a massive infarct of the artery that feeds the perisylvian area here. So all this black stuff here is damaged tissue of the brain. So this guy was unable to walk and talk for a long time, but then with rehabilitation he was able to pick up again and communicate. And we tested him about, I think, 2 or 3 years after his damage. And what we did exactly the same experiment with him as before. And we used 35 control subjects. This guy was actually an engineer with a very high level of linguistic abilities. You know, he spoke French, he spoke English, and he spoke standard Arabic, and he knew Lebanese Arabic as well. So these are his results. Okay, so there's no effect of the root. There's no effect of the root without semantics, but there is an effect of the word pattern. Okay, suggesting to us that once again this idea of decomposing the word into a root and a word pattern is back, but this time it does not extract the root consonants. It just extracts the vowels of the word pattern. Okay, suggesting once again that there's distinct neural representation for these morphemes, and that they can be actually affected selectively in the brain. So one of them has a problem while the other is not a problem. Thank you very much for your attention.